and I call the meeting to order at 9:34 a.m. President Carol Rowe, Bill McGowan, Wayne Sawchuk, Paul Kears, Dan Coughlin.
Does Dan have anything about that to say?
Let's see, I got 8
Haven't seen it, Wayne.
Excuse me?
I haven't seen it.
Oh, you
I'll
have.
send it to you, Dan.
The purpose of the amendment was just technically to reduce the number of EDUs by about 1/3 of an EDU to represent a bedroom that isn't a bedroom. So then but this is just the way the rest of the amendment has to say in terms of referring back to the original agreement.
Yeah.
But I just didn't know if that was in any way.
So Carol, do you want to introduce the first gentleman in? I have to step outside for 1 second. I've got our finest outside giving tickets to everybody on the planet here, and I've already gotten about 3 today, so I'll be right back.
Okay. All right. I just want to let you know that the abatement person, I'm going to put them in.
Yeah.
They have not received anything from the water department as of yet.
Now Brenda is on the line, I think, right?
Nope, that's just me.
Oh.
I didn't change my name.
Oh,
The
okay.
account's in her name.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. I just have to change it.
Yes.
There we go. Okay, so he's here. If you could unmute yourself and you could speak to the board regarding your abatement.
And do we have the information on it?
I sent it with the meeting request.
Okay.
So do we have, is he joining us or Carol?
Vincent, are you there?
Oh, I'm sorry, I am. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I just switched over. Apparently the picture's not working. Yes, this is Vincent Augustino with Ava Cucina in Cohasset. Just addressing the busted pipe that was underneath the cellar that burst in February during that coal freeze.
And if you'd like to explain to them what happened.
So unfortunately, we didn't know the pipe burst underneath the cellar because it's just a crawl space cellar. And do you remember? My wife's here with me. We
had
several months.
we had a plumbing problem. So when the drain doctors or the drain shooters or whatever it was called came in to try to unclog the toilet, they said, oh, I think we need to go from underneath. So when they opened up the hatch to go underneath, they found the burst pipe, which they did repair for us. But knowing the building, I don't know if you know the building, but there's absolutely no reason for us to ever go underneath unless there is such a problem. And, without having that toilet issue, we probably would have never known until I got the bill, and I almost passed out when I got the bill, because our normal water bills are somewhere in and around $425, $450 a quarter, maybe would be a high month. And this quarter was $1,600 because of that pipe that we didn't know anything about. So.
Did any of this water go through the toilet itself?
No. I mean, without as far as the toilet was concerned, it was just a bad clog, and they were able to also repair that. But it was 2 totally separate issues. Nothing was even. They weren't even in the same area of the basement, or not even the basement, the crawl space.
Did the water department give you an abatement?
We haven't gotten anything from anybody yet.
Now, was it like a leak where it was spraying out? Because it
Yes.
obviously, if it was the mat, it was, cut completely, you wouldn't
No,
have.
no, it was like literally just spraying out. It must have froze when we had that cold snap. And once it thawed out, it had some kind of a way to access out of the pipe. I don't even know, I mean, but they did fix it for us, so.
I'm curious, were you able to get, I don't know what you submitted, whether or not you submitted a copy of the
I
water
submitted
bill
everything
usage
that they
by day.
required, so
I'm sorry,
I had submitted whatever they had requested. I submitted an explanation, and I submitted that it was repaired, and I also submitted copies of both quarters of the bill, just noting the huge difference.
Yep, we have it.
okay, now, they can do a printout of exactly what day and time. The
I
water
think they
change.
said February 5th, maybe.
Okay. And often you relate that to what happened, in terms of the weather forecast and stuff, that in fact,
Right.
it was 22 degrees that day, and that's why that's when it started. And then obviously, when you found it sometime later, when you got the bill. it
Well,
would've
no, we found it when they went to fix the toilet. That was the only reason why we found it.
been, right, but that made it change, so it went back to what your normal reading would be.
Right.
Right, so you have just a complete time frame of it. Then if you divided it by the number of days, you know how much it was losing a day and stuff like that. I'm certainly in favor of something, because it's sort of out of your control, of having it's a leak rather than, totally busted and opened up where you would know it. So you didn't
Right.
have the knowledge until you got the next bill. But I was just looking for the difference between what your normal bill is and what this particular incident is.
Wayne,
It's about 800, I think. I think her
There-
normal bill is about 450 and the bill that came in was 1,600.
That's 1,200.
Right, the bill was 1,600, which 400 is what the normal bill was, or something.
Correct.
Yeah, 425 or 450, whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd like to hear, I would, in my own opinion, before we do anything, I'd like to hear what the water department does. Are they gonna give you a full abatement on this?
So when do we find out from them? I mean, we haven't, again, we're just going by the emails that we get telling us when we're supposed to sign on and whatever, but we sent out the information to both the sewer and the water simultaneously at the same time. We sent them, the same information.
Yeah, so I mean, none of this water went through our sewer system at all, because it's a water main break for them. So I'm kind of in the same camp with Wayne here. This is a unique event that had nothing to do with the water going through the sewer system.
I hear what you're saying. I don't know. I mean, it seems to me that if there's what I would like to see is a picture of where this thing is and where the pipe is for the sewer. And if they're two completely distinct things, I would say, fine, let's give them an abatement for the whole thing.
Well,
This pipe's underneath the crawl space, Bill. I mean,
I can crawl under there and take a picture of it, but it's really.
I'm trying not to be a pain, but I mean,
It's not my favorite thing to do.
no, I understand that. Did we get, Carol, did we get stuff from their repair company?
not any pictures or anything, no.
But we got information from them.
Yep, everything was sent with the, it was all data
Application.
logs. I can resend it to you if you want it.
No, it's all right.
The notes that Brenda put on here was the leak started 2/6/23. And then it was fixed 4/24/23.
What was the date it was fixed again?
4/24/23.
Yeah, so it really wasn't a big, it's a leak, but it wasn't a big leak, but it's something that you would not normally know is happening. So I think, so finding it, was great. And it wasn't, none of this is your fault.
Yeah.
It's only weather related.
I'm just surprised that if the ground is frozen and all that, that didn't come out somewhere. They didn't
Well,
see it.
the crawl space bill is
Dirt floor.
dirt floor. And like I said, remember that cold snap that went below 0. I mean, we can't even hear it from above.
But there's no way we would have known, thankfully, that the toilet was clogged. Otherwise, we wouldn't have known until we got our bill that there was a problem.
Well, I'm in favor of doing something positive, and I just think we need what the water department's going to do too, so that.
Well, we would greatly appreciate anything that can be done, because like we said, if you look at our past bills, $1,600 is basically a whole year for us, not just one quarter.
Right, and also the water didn't come into the sewer plant. It was going into the gravel that's on the ground,
Yeah,
so that it wasn't an additional flow for which it would be billable. It was sort of something that was outside the, most of the time we get toilets that continue running and using up water. Well, that water is going into the sewer treatment plant as fresh water, but it's sewer. Here's a case where it's
Put on there next.
it's outside your jurisdiction almost. So I'm in favor of doing something.
Well, why don't you make a motion, Wayne?
What was the total amount that was over?
1,600?
It was 1,200 is what they're looking for.
All right, 1,200, you're right.
Well, that's water and sewer
1,200 is water and sewer?
total.
All
total.
right,
yeah.
so what is the sewer?
775. Their average is 190.
So they're looking basically for about $500.
Well,
Roughly, yes.
oh yeah, okay. I would make a motion to abate $500 of the sewer bill for the period, February 5th to April 24th, 2000.
Thank you very much.
No, they have to get a vote from the other two members.
Yeah, I'll second that, and we'll do a roll call. Bill McGowan, aye.
Paul Kearsarge.
Wayne Sawchuck, aye.
All right. I'll submit that and it will show up on your next quarter's bill.
Thank you. And
Thank
what
you.
about the water now? What do we have to do for that?
I would contact Brenda Douglas at the water department. She'll be able to give you more information.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, everyone. Well appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so next was. Let me find it. Approval of the last meeting's minutes. If anyone would like to.
I haven't had a
approve.
chance to be honest, I haven't had a chance to read them yet, so.
Okay,
Likewise.
all right. If you guys can whenever you guys get a chance, if you could read them and let me know,
All right,
because they're supposed to be posted within 30 days.
Oh, okay, 30.
Okay,
Okay, next up on the agenda is 110 Jerusalem.
Yep.
And I believe Dan can speak to that, as I gave him all of the information and he just sent us an email this morning.
I read all of the sewer extension and grinder pump plan review, and I think it's all good and accurate.
So early in the year, they had a pump relocation, and the original plan was basically for the pool house and the garage to be hooked up into the main house and tied to its plumbing system. I guess that wasn't going to work out for them because of elevations, so they proposed to have the pool house and the garage drain to a separate grinder pump, which in turn would then pump it over to the gravity line going into their original grinder pump. So basically, I did a review of everything. It looks fine. I just asked for more clarification and definition. There did not appear to be any floor drains in the garage, and that was confirmed by one of the builders. Nothing's proposed there, so we don't have to worry about floor drains or gas leaks or oil leaks, which would have to go to a separator first. The entire connection is basically to service 2 toilets and 3 sinks in the two structures. The garage is an existing structure. The pool house is a proposed structure. My only other concern was the pool filter, to make sure that that wasn't discharged into the sewer. And that was also confirmed that it will not be connected to the sewer. So the remainder of my comments in there are basically just some technical issues. There weren't any rim or invert elevations provided with the connection manhole. Still kind of unknown if that's going to work properly as they have detailed it. But I also had attached kind of a waiver of liability form in there too, in case that the force main needs to go shallower in order to enter that system. And if that's the case, they may have to either insulate or heat trace some of the pressure main in order so it doesn't freeze, or provide a drain back of some kind. So there's still a little bit of analysis that needs to be done, but for the most part, it's generally engineering wise should be feasible.
So are there,
No additional bedrooms. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, so on the application, they had a 5-bedroom is what exists there. They're adding though, right?
What they actually had was, if you look at the assessors map, they had them rated for 13 bedrooms originally.
Okay,
And what they're doing is they've modified some of the interior layouts and done a little bit of addition. But they have basically 4 main bedrooms and a guest bedroom. So their final rendition is 5 bedrooms.
so
as
there's
far as
it
what's proposed.
is with the additional,
Yeah, you broke up. Sorry, Paul.
are there additional EDUs being added?
Does not appear so.
Okay,
Like I said, the original one was 13.
Yeah.
That's the classification of bedrooms, and now they only have 5.
okay.
is this the home by the Cunningham Bridge?
No, this is actually over near
Bow
Bow
Street,
Street,
yeah. Off of
elevated off the road.
Steep Rocks Estates is the entrance to go up to the
Oh, yeah,
drive.
okay, right.
And it's the big one at the end, I think, right? The one you can
Yes.
see forever. So.
So they have, so is this is going to be a pressure connection?
Yes, well, it's going to be a pressure connection to one of their existing gravity lines, which in turn will then flow to their main grinder pump, which pumps into the pressure sewer.
Right, so there was an asterisk here for the application fee. It looks like they don't know what to pay, so
They
think
paid the
they-
$1,700.
they did.
Yeah. So that will cover basically fibers, pressure testing and inspection.
Okay,
did you bill this separately, Dan? Or did, will this be covered by the $1,700, including the testing?
You should have sufficient money in the 1,700 to cover the inspection time.
Okay, I mean,
That's
I was
what we're
thinking your review of this and stuff, because this is not, it's unusual to have
Right.
this much of a complicated, you know,
Yeah, I still think it should be sufficient, so long as we don't have to do 5 inspections versus maybe 2.
okay,
So long as the contractor is ready, and the contractor, I believe, is a new drain layer. Carol, I'm not sure if he already
Jake
got approved.
Raguso. It's Jake Raguso. I have all the information for him for a drain layer for Cohasset.
Okay, so he's already been approved as a drain layer?
Yes.
Dan, do they have any ledge removal or any of that stuff that is necessary?
Nothing noted. There's certainly some ledge up there. That's, I think, in part, they're hoping to go fairly shallow with the gravity services to the grinder pump. But that doesn't always work out, so we'll have to see how the construction goes or progresses. Like I said, if they do go shallower, I did attach a waiver form to my review. And they may have to insulate the pressure sewer pipe, and they may have to even detrace the pressure sewer pipe.
Don't they, I think they have to get a permit if they do any ledge work, right?
I'm not sure if that's just exposed ledge.
It could
But-
be,
Obviously, it's not within our domain, and it is outside the 100-foot buffer, from what I can tell. So doesn't seem to be any Concom filings that would be required. But again, outside our domain.
all right.
So do I need to contact anyone to let them know that we reviewed this today, or is that something you would do, Dan?
I think basically the board would have to just take a vote to approve the application,
Okay,
and then we can proceed.
Now, does he have a building permit? Does he have everything else? I mean, all
Yeah,
set up.
they've been working on this for some time, so I'm assuming they have a building permit. It's
I'd
probably
like,
been-
I'd like to make sure we have a building permit in place before we vote on it.
Carol can check that.
yeah, hold on.
Okay, Carol, can you ask John about that?
Yep, I can check right here.
Oh,
Jerusalem.
you don't usually require a building permit for doing a sewer connection. So I don't know if.
right, but they're building a pool house, right?
And adding a
Right.
bath.
Oh, okay,
And I think that
Did not
there was
have any-
another one on
Yeah,
Jerusalem,
I
but I
mean-
don't remember exactly where it was. They built a pool house. And they did have a building permit, and we were and then they decided to put a toilet in there. It's on one of the homes facing they were actually right on the water side of Jerusalem Road.
Yeah, they did not have any plans for the pool house. I did review the garage renovation plans, and those seem to be consistent with the application.
According to Permitize, they do have a permit.
Yeah,
yeah, that's good. Okay, so I make a motion to approve the permit for the sewer connection. Sewer connection
Extension.
The application,
extension.
all right, I'll second it. We'll do a roll call. Bill McGowan, aye.
Paul Kearside.
Wayne Sawchuck, aye.
all right, so next thing was the sewer break that was on Jerusalem Road.
Yep.
So Brian or Scott would probably have more information on that.
This is a new break or?
No, this was this over a month ago, I'm assuming, but because of the 4th of July and everything, we've pushed everything back. So I didn't know if you wanted to still speak to it or.
Well, what are the missing links? I mean, in other words,
Well, there was a blockage
right,
and
right,
what happened was it backed up into people's yards and garages.
right.
So, they called the town hall and let us know that there was an issue. And at this point, what we've done was, we paid the bills that they had because the issue was on our end, not theirs.
Right, so I think what this meeting was gonna do is tell us potentially what the cause was and how do we avoid it type of thing. And why was there a blockage?
Sure. So,
If we know.
well, so we don't know. There was, so the North Cohasset, the original North Cohasset section, started at just from Linden Drive, basically northward. And then the Little Harbor project came up to Rust Way. And then there was a pipeline, and maybe Dan knows a little bit more of the history, but that connected the dots along Jerusalem Road between Rust Way and Linden Drive. And it appears that everybody, Scott may have the exact date, but everybody north of that area from Linden Drive north experienced, higher pressure that resulted in some alarms. And that the two lowest properties were the house basically at the, or two of the lowest properties at Linden Drive, the corner of Linden and Jerusalem, and then one by right on Straits Pond at the end of Jerusalem. They experienced breaks at their pump connections due to the high pressure. Scott responded pretty quickly within, I think it was a weekend. He was out there in a couple hours, opened the valve to Hull, and it relieved the pressure. So it looks like the blockage is between Rust Way and Linden Drive. We're not exactly sure that it's been cleared yet, and we're developing a plan on flushing that piece. You kind of a unidirectional flush one way and then flush the other way. Scott and Rosano Davis and I have talked about it. We're looking at plans. There's a flushing connection on the north side, and we need to find one on the south side, basically, to flush both ways and make sure that there's no issues out there. So that plan's being developed. When we get it, we'll send it to the board, and Dan and everyone can review it before we execute it. But I think that's the only way to ensure that there is no blockage in that area. The other thing that was peculiar and Scott found was that there's a valve between Linden Drive and Rust Way that it's either a reverse turn valve or it appeared to be closed. So that may have been the culprit. But the question is, if it was closed, where was the sewer going? When we were conveying, we were close to Hull and we were close there. Sewage is going somewhere, right? So that's still kind of an enigma. We need to incorporate in the plan. When we're flushing, we'll operate that valve and see if it stops flow, or so then we can determine, is it a reverse turn valve or what's going on there. So
for
that's
the
in a nutshell. There are two abatements requested or bills that are the sewer department's responsibility. It's Mrs. Gillis's break, which is right at the corner of Jerusalem and Linden, and then I forget the other address. Maybe Carol can tell us what that one is.
Did Rosano Davis do the fixes on those two?
So it was a Saturday, and the first call I got was from Christian Davis from Rosano Davis saying, "Hey, is any sewer work going on in North Cohasset? We're receiving a lot of calls for pressure issues." And then I got on the phone with Scott, and then we conferenced together. Scott went out and responded and basically found all the alarms, and I'll let Scott talk about what he found on site that day.
Yeah, sure. As Brian said, the water department got a lot of calls, which got in touch with me. Once I got out there, I was able to see, and hear right away, everybody north of Forest Ave, all the alarms were going off. So again, the initial thought was, let's open that valve back to Hull, and it was almost instant. As soon as you opened it up, it had a place to go. We were able to reset everybody's alarms. Everybody was good with the exception of that woman there at, what is her, Mrs. Gillis there, 497 Jerusalem. And just, there was no real break per se, so there was no break to our system. So there was no leak, there was nothing to that extent. The only breaks were inside these two homeowners' grinder pump pits. So there was no leak or anything for that per se. So, and as Brian alluded to that valve, we don't really know. When I was able to get on that valve, it took a long time to clear out that valve. So it doesn't appear that someone had just closed it. And then if it was closed for a long time, exactly where was everything going at that point when we had Hull closed? That's a mystery that we do have to solve. But just to kind of sum it all up here, it's there is that blockage. It has to be right there, because just to the right of that valve, everybody was working. Just to the left of it, nobody was working. And so as soon as we were able to relieve the pressure, everyone was able to use their facilities again. And, that's kind of where we are right now. As Brian said, we're working with Rosano Davis, and we're probably going to have Dan jump in as well, just to kind of come up with a good game plan of how to go about flushing it.
So who has access to that valve? Is it not covered and locked, or is it, something where someone?
It's just a valve in the middle of the street. The only way nobody just turned it to turn it.
Okay.
It would have had to have been I don't want to say our water department, but somebody that had a wrench. There's a special wrench to turn it, but it's just a 6-inch cover in the road that you just pick up and put the wrench on and turn it. But when I said it took a while to get in, it was packed with mud all the way up to the top, filled with water. There were no visible signs that somebody was just in there yesterday or the day before. Nobody had been in there for a little while, it appeared.
So, let me ask for the uneducated here, let me ask a question. I thought when we had grinder pumps, and I'm going back to when I hooked up back, I don't know, 15 years ago or more, not 20 years ago now, that having grinder pumps would prevent leaks because they were, mashing everything up into kind of a liquid material, or not liquid per se, but I mean, it was, much finer.
Yeah, so the issue here is, there was a blockage, the flow had nowhere to go. And as the grinder pumps in that area were pumping out, the pressure was rising and rising and rising. And obviously the lowest elevation areas had the highest pressure. So the connections where their pumps connect to the pressure sewer, that's where the breaks were, basically right where the connection to the pressure sewer was. And it was basically a busted fitting at their grinder pump on the street side as a result of those high pressures. So I would say pretty definitively that, the blockage in the collection system caused those two particular leaks, but there was no break within the collection system mains or, any of that stuff.
So if there was a blockage, Scott just said he turned the valve and everything flowed just fine.
Yeah, but the blockage can still be there.
Right.
If that's the problem, I think, is, it's at this end of the pipe, everything else is flowing now. If they open up that valve, hopefully it can flush out that, whatever that blockage is. Now, there may be places there where there's gravity going into it. I don't know what it is on, portions where something larger than something ground up could have actually.
Is it something that we need to run a camera down, or?
Probably a good idea.
you know, and then the question is, why was this valve, you know, closed or hard to turn or harder to open or not close? And do we need to inspect that valve itself?
I mean, the valve was turned okay. It was it's just getting to the valve, you know, if you're after, you know, especially being right by the beach there, a lot of grit, a lot of dirt on the road, it just gets filled up over time. But there were no real issue with the valve, per se.
Scott,
Just to,
is this
sorry.
something that you guys go around and check valves and exercise them every once in a while, just to be sure they can open and close?
And when exercise,
Knows okay.
a valve exercise program, yes. Unfortunately, it's just not something that we're really able to keep up on at this moment.
I know you have other things to deal with.
I mean, I could
Yeah.
tell you that so we had the, you know, the membrane issue a couple of years ago, and we had to divert, you know, we changed flow direction from Hull and then back to Cohasset. And the particular valve that he found that seemed to be buried and hadn't been operated for quite some time, that wasn't part of any of our plans during those exercises. We used a valve at Rust Way. We used a valve at the end of Jerusalem Road. We used a valve near Bow Street and Jerusalem Road, and then a little further up near Gammons, and then again by the Commons. So that valve wasn't part of it. There were probably 6 valves that were operated, open and closed. And you know, a valve works when you open and close it, it's 3 times the diameter plus 3. And if you get that turn count up and you can feel it hit the seat, and then you turn it down and you get the same, you know, turn count, and it's operating smoothly, you kind of get a feel that it's operating okay. The question is, why is it either a reverse turn or closed? So right now, when Scott responded to the site, he opened the valve to Hull, which then relieved the pressure. So all the flow should have been going to Cohasset. He opened it to Hull, so that relieved the pressure going that way. So we still may have a blockage in that section between Linden and Rust that we're now developing a plan to say, you know, we'll flush it this way. Is there flow at the flushing connection? Flush it the other way to see, you know, is there flow? So that's kind of what we need to do. And in that, we'll also determine, you know, what's open and closed in that valve. Is it a right turn or a left turn valve?
Yeah.
Which is sometimes when you have these, you know, when you have one contract, like the whole North Cohasset, those valves were all purchased together and they all have the same operating, you know, turn usually. And then Little Harbor would probably all be purchased together. You have this weird section between Rust Way and Linden that was, I don't know the history of when it was connected after. I think there was a house that wanted to extend it a little bit. So that may have been a one-off type valve, and Dan may know the history better, but
Yeah, I think Ross Rosano did that. It was a private extension. And it was done basically to service those homes kind of at the end of Rustway.
right. So that valve, that
Yeah.
one valve could have been a separate purchase, separate from the North Cohasset potentially. You know, and then maybe it didn't follow the standards of a right turn or a left turn. Which way do you turn open, Scott?
Left to open.
Left open, yeah.
So to Paul's idea, you know, would it make sense to like camera that section of the pipe just to see what's going on?
It'd be
So
tough
that-
to camera. You could try doing some flow reversals though. There's 2 things that can cause a plug. That's you know, all this stuff is ground up, but it can also reaccumulate as it rolls. And if you push the flow in 2 different directions a couple of times, sometimes you can make these balls that collect in the system. The other thing that can cause blockages is if you have a valve closed for a long period of time, like it says this one is, sometimes there's material that packs up against that valve. And you try to move it and it basically causes a blockage. But there may be ways of basically reversing the flow a couple of times back and forth to maybe loosen up it, clear the blockage and allow it to go.
Are you just going to move the clog farther downstream?
Once it's rolling though, it you know, hopefully it's not an issue. You know, it is all uniform pipe there. The only thing that you have in the way is potentially some bends. But it
Is
is a
it-
6-inch pipe. So
Is it pressure main or is it gravity?
It's all pressure main.
Yeah, that's the issue on cameraing it. You know, gravity main, you can pop a manhole. If you have low flow, you stick the camera up to camera pressure main. You'd have to excavate it, cut out a section of pipe potentially to get access to it, and you know, to get a camera down. Maybe a blow off, you could get it in, but it'd be a little more difficult. So
Yeah,
you know,
there are-
you could flush each
there are-
way and determine, you know, do you have good flow in one direction, good flow in the other direction, or is it, you know, something blocking? And you would
I've had some-
isolate that flow so that it doesn't go beyond your flushing connection, you know.
I've had some good luck with using Greg Pyburn at Pyburn and Sons to actually listen on the valves to see if flow is passing it. So you can basically then isolate where it is. And occasionally he can also hear with his, you know, acoustic equipment if there's a partial blockage. So we can try a couple of things on flow reversal, and if that doesn't work, maybe we can get Greg down there and he can try to listen enough to see if we can detect where the problem is.
So the other challenge is the actual flushing operation itself is, you know, we can use system flow, which is variable, you know, people grinder pumps providing the pressure and the flow, or we could, you know, introduce a hydrant flow connection, but we need to be very careful on, you know, keeping the pressure at a low level and keeping the flow. So we'd need some pressure gauges. Regardless, we'd probably want pressure gauges out there on each the flushing connection and the other connection, the introduction of water. But anyway, that's kind of the balancing act we need to do. I think it would be better to do a hydrant connection and get a clear flow and flush, because then you know when you get that clean water at the end and you've, you know, gotten rid of any of the you know, the garbage that might be in the pipe.
Yeah, I mean, generally you can try using the system pressure. That doesn't really build up a lot. Obviously, your water system has good pressures in that area. The pipe should still be able to withstand those pressures. It's just the only real concern I would have would be water handling, how quickly that flow is introduced and how quickly the pressure is sensed. So water handling could be your biggest problem, I think, potentially moving it that way.
So I guess at any rate, we don't belabor get into techno, but we'll put a plan together with some detail. We'll send it around, and Dan can review, Scott and Rob and everybody can weigh in, and before we execute, and it'll probably be Davis, Rosano Davis with a pump truck at the flushing connection, and either we'll use system pressure or we'll have a hydrant connection at another flushing point in the other side.
So in part of that, and do you go around and get baseline where you get the pressure readings everywhere first before you start?
Yeah. So we could, we'd probably get baselines at the flushing connections just on the system pressure. I think it's a little more difficult to just get pressures at grinder pumps.
Okay.
Without making some sort of, you know, connection to connect a pressure gauge.
Got it.
Again, Pyburn does have his apparatus for testing the pumps, so we could use that, but you know, it's you're only going to measure one at a time. We have in the past also installed pressure gauges in some of the flushing connections and left them on to monitor the recording gauges. And sometimes that can help, and maybe we could set some of those up. That way you can see it all the time.
Right.
Okay.
So the non-service connections, you have the flushing points and you have air valves at the high points, right? We could probably plumb something off of those for pressure or flushing or.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a mystery on our hands, so the only way to start is to have a baseline.
Right, but this isn't necessarily an unusual thing, isn't it? I mean, this, when the valve is closed, you've got a dead end. And even though flow is going from there out, it tends to almost always have an accumulation before that, you know, at that point. So you know, we just have to do the proper maintenance and stuff and do the exercising of the valves and stuff and that as we go forward after we clean this out.
Yeah, that's a good recommendation.
And I think it's summertime now, and it would be great to do it when we're not dealing with any bad weather and stuff like that, even though there might be a little bit more traffic. So I just suggest that we move forward and whatever we need to do, we do.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Hey,
All right.
what's next?
Next is the Woodard and Curran, their presentations and findings. That was the, I guess the report you guys did.
Yeah, hi, it's Pete Lyons. Trying to share my screen, but saying that it's been disabled. Is that something you can help with, Carol?
I'm trying.
Okay.
Let me see.
Yeah, and thanks for inviting me back. I know last time, I think a month ago, I had lost internet about 2 minutes in, so I'm in the office today. Hopefully it'll stay strong for us. And I guess while Carol tries to get that going. So the intent today is I have a map that shows the sewers that we inspected between end of February and early April surrounding the treatment plant. And just the general findings, what we saw, it's largely, all pipes had varying signs of infiltration. So some had,
This is Carol.
oh, here we go. I'm sharing.
Engineering department.
All right. Can
Who
everyone,
was it specifically you were trying to reach?
can everyone see this?
Yes.
I'll mute Carol just so.
What information?
Okay, so real quick, so there are three things that if time allows, I'd like to talk about. So the sewer inspection findings that we completed surrounding the treatment plant, the Mass DEP asset management planning grant. Brian, I don't know if you've briefed the board on that. I think Rob has sort of discussed that a little bit. And then the CZM grant for the sewer and electrical improvements. So if time allows, we'll get to the second two, but I'll run through this. So yeah, Woodard and Curran hired a national water main to complete sewer inspection of the gravity sewers that surround the treatment plant. And this map that hopefully everyone can see generally pretty well is the sewer system surrounding the treatment plant, which is located right here. Everything highlighted in blue is what was inspected with internal CCTV camera. This in green, we had actually inspected probably 3 or 4 years ago. And then in pink here is what we weren't able to inspect, basically due to access. So the general findings, so we inspected about 10,000 feet of pipe. We had completed inspection just after a generally large flow event. So flows were up, they came down, and then we did inspection, right? So groundwater was probably higher than average during these inspections, but they weren't at the point where the marsh was flooded. So yeah, all pipes that we inspected showed signs of infiltration. And these are pretty much most of the pipes, besides this stretch over here, is clay, right? So old clay pipe installed in the 70s. This is pretty typical of that sort of era. 7 pipes had grease buildup. We actually found a good amount of grease in this line here, which was sort of interesting, an interesting finding, because there's, not a whole lot of restaurants in this area. We found some moderate corrosion in the concrete manholes and pipes. This is RCP pipe coming up here, 18-inch. And that corrosion is typically just from wastewater off-gassing. Bacteria eat the off gases and then secrete sulfuric acid, which corrodes pipe, right? And then just generally, the GIS, we made some improvements when we were doing this work.
When you have inspection stopped due to debris, was anything done with that debris?
Yeah, so they cleaned. So zooming in here. So all of these pipes were cleaned and then inspected. And these pipes here, we decided not to clean during this effort because when we cleaned this line, we actually were finding that we're backing up some of the houses over here. We got a couple calls from the residents saying, hey, our toilet's bubbling. So at that point in time, we had decided to not move forward with cleaning this line. We just didn't want to risk a backup for this sort of maintenance type of inspection.
What about the one at 106?
106. So this manhole is in this backyard and through the marsh. So they couldn't physically get their Vector truck out there to clean it.
Okay. Was it really looked at with taking the cover off?
We didn't take the cover off here, but we were able to inspect up to here and inspect up to here. So it's just really these little two sections here that were not visibly seen.
But you don't think there's any problems with it?
I would say likely not. I would say the condition of this pipe is probably similar to the condition of these pipes. And I've got a couple of pictures.
Thank you.
So yeah, this is sort of the high level overview. Again, we inspected about 10,000 feet. All the pipes showed signs of infiltration. So the next few maps are just kind of zoom ins of the area. So here's North Main Street. You can see this picture is of this manhole here. And this is taking a camera and going up this way. What you can see is a bunch of grease buildup. We saw it in the pipes. We cleaned out all the grease in the pipes. But it was just sort of an interesting finding of, why would there be so much grease in this area?
Yeah, so if I could just comment, so that manhole is where the Little Harbor pressure sewer dumps into the gravity, and like right in front of the parish house there. And everything north of that is residential. There's no like restaurants or anything like that where you would expect a ton of grease, but there's a lot of grease there. So interesting.
Yeah, and if it's hasn't been cleaned in a long time, grease just tends to build up. Obviously, residents dumping grease down their sink just builds up over time. Right. So it's certainly not uncommon, but it was just a little bit unexpected. So I just want to highlight that.
Was there any evidence of surcharging in that manhole or around that area?
Yeah, I would say, there's whenever you see debris on the bench, right? So you got the pipe invert, right? And then the bench. The fact that the grease is up here and above the pipe, there's likely times during the year that this might surcharge. Yeah. But I don't think there's ever been an SSO in this area. So, just continued sort of maybe like a annual flushing of this line, maybe prudent or something like that. The other thing I just wanted to point out is the corrosion here. So what you're looking at is a concrete manhole. Right here's the clay sewer. Right, this is the manhole. Just over time, the concrete fails. Right, it's in this wastewater corrosive environment, and concrete fails in a really sort of predictable manner. Right, sort of smooth walls. The concrete starts falling off. As it starts to fall off, you can see the aggregate. Over time, that aggregate falls out, and then you can see rebar, right? So this is sort of like a long process. So, you know, if you were to do rehabilitation of the sewer in this area, you know, we would recommend also doing like a cementitious liner that has some corrosion proofing on the manholes. And that's going to help with infiltration as well as just, you know, long-term care for the manholes. So, and I've got notes on, you know, where we saw different defects, but I just pulled out, you know, pictures that I thought were sort of important to call out, right? So, right, so there's some infiltration here, there's some cracking, there's spot repair done. But I'll just kind of cruise through here. So this is the area around the plant. Here's the line that goes to the marsh. Really what I wanted to show here, this pipe looked pretty good. You know, this would be a candidate that likely has infiltration. We saw some, it's kind of hard to tell from the picture, but what you're looking at is sewer pipe. Here's the joint in the clay pipe. The sort of brown staining is essentially mineral deposits, right? So groundwater coming in through the joint, leaving a stain. I think that we saw some water coming in, but it wasn't so significant that it'd be causing flow issues at your plant, right? But this is sort of like probably always leaking a little bit. Up here, this is a crack in the top of the pipe, groundwater coming in, and then you can see the staining, right? So what we didn't see is a large hole in the pipe that's draining the marsh, right? That's sort of the takeaway. Here's a pipe down on South Main Street, right? So not in the marsh, in the street down here. This is a crack, probably at the about 9 o'clock position in the pipe. And it's hard to tell, but this is groundwater coming into the pipe, right? So crack in the pipe, groundwater comes in. And then the last picture that I pulled out here is just another one of the manhole. This is the manhole, basically where all the pipes come in here. More concrete corrosion, right? In my opinion, this is not something you need to fix like now from a structural standpoint. But if you were to do a project, you definitely want to just do this at the same time. You have all the bypass up and running and you can get it all done.
Are there any photos taking where the red line in is across the gas station where we had that big main break and there's the culvert is right there?
Wait, could you point? Is it over here?
Gas station? Depot Court, I think. No, not Depot Court. Is it Depot Court?
Is that
Parking lot way or something like that?
I think actually, let me see. I think that.
Yeah, so that bend that you're referring to right there where it says SS 16.
Yep.
That's kind of where the water main break was, and we talked about it when you were out there cammering. Just take a look at that area, but I don't remember any reports on any kind of significant issue.
Yep. Yeah. No, that's that. Yep. No, we didn't see any issues near that water main break.
Okay.
And just on the elevation of the water main break, the sewer is lower than the water main out there. And the sewer treatment plant saw a lot of flow from that. So it appears, it broke up the road and it broke up the top of the manhole. So I think it was the cascading flow of water into the manhole that was in the street that caused that flow. I know we were concerned about, was there any compromise in the pipe that was lower, but it doesn't look.
That's good news.
Yeah.
So if I can ask a quick question, any idea if we were to start fixing all this, what it might cost?
So from a true budgetary point, to do 10,000 feet, right, which is basically everything highlighted in blue. And just assume that that would cover this as well. I think you're somewhere around between design, construction, and then engineering services during construction. You're probably around 900,000 to $1 million.
What, over what period of time? Is it a 1 year, 2 year deal? 3 year deal?
Yeah, I mean, the way we could phase it is you could do design 1 year and then bid it the next year. And then this project would be constructed probably take them 2 months.
Okay.
Do the whole thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, this, the potentially a little bit, probably somewhere between 2 to 4 months would be my guess. Yeah.
And
It's pretty
just
fast.
Pete, if you can kind of explain the process like an in situ form or like a trenchless technology, right?
Yep. Yeah. So what we saw, almost all of it, besides maybe one section, could be repaired using trenchless technologies. And so this would be cured in place pipelining.
Mhm.
So what it is, I'll take you through the whole process, right? So they go in the pipe, they clean the pipe out, get it free of debris and clean. They inspect the pipe to make sure it can be lined, right? So basically that it's not broken and there's no sharp edges that would rip the liner. They then bypass the section, right? Usually with like a little 3-inch pump, right? So let's just say you wanted to line this section, right? You'd clean the pipe, you'd put a pump in this manhole, you'd bypass from here down to here, right? So this would be free of flow. They then bring a big refrigerated box truck that has a fiberglass and resin saturated fiberglass sort of liner. They shoot it into the pipe with pressure. And then they cure it with steam, usually steam or water, but in this case it'd be steam. So they use temperature to cure the resin. It then creates a new pipe within the pipe. And then they come back and they have a little robot that goes in the pipe and cuts out the service connections. And after they cut out the service connections, we would typically spec them to grout the connection. So then they bring in another robot, they pump grout around the service connection to make that watertight.
Does that material, is it have a certain thickness to it? I mean, would it restrict flow?
So they're designed to be fully structural, right? So that it's a from a structural standpoint, it's a new pipe. The design of them's based on the depth of the pipe and the water table. Right. So those are the two factors. Usually what ends up actually happening is, they're like 6 millimeters thick. So they're really pretty thin. And because of it's smoother.
Mhm.
So the Manning's number is lower or higher. I can't remember how it works, but basically what ends up happening is you actually end up getting theoretically more capacity through the pipe after you line, even though you are reducing the diameter just a little bit.
Mhm.
Yeah. So this technology has been around for, I don't know, probably 50 years at this point. It's just alternative to digging and replacing. And it's certainly way cheaper. And way less disruptive, right? So I bet that they could do this whole thing like from here to there in a day or 2 days.
And is there any interruption of service to, any of our, customers connected?
Yep. So they will be out of service from the time that the liner gets inserted for it to be cured and then the service cut out. For small diameter pipe, you're probably talking 2 to 4 hours. So what we end up doing is we'll notify the project area that, hey, this project's coming. Your service may be impacted. And then usually 48 hours prior to start of the work, we'd put a flyer out to the residents saying, hey, in 2 days, your service will be impacted, limit your water use. They can still use their sewer. But we want to give them a notice to not, do all the dishes and run their laundry. Because usually what happens is they can fill up their service. Then when it gets cut out, everything goes. So they don't need to not use water, but they need to limit their use. Right. And then they get cut out when we give them another notice just saying you're good to go. And then, so basically you line the pipe. After you line the pipe, you'll do the manholes. In some cases, you can line the laterals as well. So, depending on ownership, I don't remember how, if Cohasset owns the laterals to the property line, or if they don't own the laterals, how does that work in Cohasset?
So I think it's up to the property line on each of them.
Yep. So in theory, you could line the laterals. It's pretty expensive. The technology's not quite as good as lining the sewer main. So typically, unless we have a reason to line the lateral, grouting the connection is usually the most cost-effective method.
And does the board have a copy of this?
I know it's been sent to Carol.
Yes, I think it was emailed around maybe a month ago.
Mhm.
All right.
We'll send it again today.
Yep.
So the cracks that were in the pipe, does that liner seal those cracks?
Yep. Yeah, and it ends up being jointless, right? So it's one continuous pipe within the pipe. So there's no joints. And then we'll put a gasket at each manhole connection. So the theory is you're going to remove all the infiltration that's coming in from the sewer main as well as from the manhole.
And then what do we do about the concrete and the aggregate that's eroding?
That's simply just they basically pressure wash the manhole and get it clean, and then they'll just they can spin cast or just trowel on new concrete. And there's some design decisions there. So you can do a cementitious liner that has calcium aluminate in it, that's resistant to corrosion. Or in other cases, like in Hull, we did this process down Nantasket Ave for their 36-inch interceptor. And there we did epoxy liner. So the epoxy liner, has a much longer lifespan and is super resistant to corrosion. So
there isn't too many that you identified there. I don't know if there's something we need to inspect all of them, but that would be a separate project we can do, I would think, to mitigate that issue.
yeah, and if you can bundle them together, usually they're the same contractors typically. You get better pricing.
Okay, so part of that 900 would be that issue as well.
Yeah. And I'm just doing this is a budgetary number, right? We haven't looked at specifics. But that would be a good budgetary number to talk about.
I always try to do like the low hanging fruit. Do you know if you've identified any big contributors? And the next question would be is how much II would be removed as part of this program?
Yep. So
Yeah, I was hoping there'd be one smoking gun that was, 35 gallons a minute or something like that, but it wasn't. It was death by 1,000 cuts kind of, which is.
Yeah, and I could get you like a good estimate on the infiltration. But it's hard. It's one of the challenges, right, is how we would estimate the infiltration is based on the inspection that we saw, right? So we know that flows were generally lower than your peaks, right? So whatever we're seeing is not as bad as what happens during high flow events. Unless we want to talk, maybe there's a bunch of sump pumps, right? But we can save that for another day.
Yeah, and just generally on that note, it was dry, and we scheduled it for, well, it was kind of a dry period. We also had the tide gate in storm mode, which kept the level of Jacobs Meadow in that marsh area as low as possible. So like today it's in normal mode, which lets in, 7.5 feet of tide. So it's, you're going to have head pressure that was probably double or more than when they inspected it. So you can anticipate that those weeping joints are, they have double the head pressure than they did when that happened. So they'll be worse. But it's, again, I was hoping they'd find like, oh, there's one big break. Let's just, do a quick hit and we can reduce the I&I by X. But again, nothing really like that.
Peter,
But-
were you able to look at the flow data at all that we have on the flow meters? To try to see where the majority of the II is coming through, or is?
I haven't taken it that far at this point. Certainly we could look at that, but yeah, I haven't compared to like what was the flow during this inspection event and what is it when it's higher,
Right. I mean,
Um,
just try to isolate the legs of the system that are contributing the most. And maybe that way you could prioritize those areas, or.
Yeah, certainly, like, yeah, I mean, a phased approach, with some, more detailed justification about why do, this section and not do that section. Maybe, you could get into that sort of analysis. We just haven't done that.
But clearly during, high tides like they're having now, the amount of water that's going into the pipe going through the marsh absolutely is increasing. And so, do you make that a priority? Because at one point in time, we thought about taking the houses along Elm Street and putting them into the force main and getting them out of going from their house to the main in this marsh, just to eliminate. And because we did have a lot of situations where the marsh tends to rise and go down, and a lot of those pipes are very, very shallow coming out of the Elm Street houses.
Yep.
And so, we did different work there, but it seems like the flows going through the marsh now, like Brian said, a 7.5 feet of water can really squeeze water through a joint. So
Yeah. And there's certainly some advantage, like not even talking about II, right? There certainly would be some advantage to line some of these critical pipes that go through the marsh that, say they were to have a structural problem, right? If you were to have a collapse out here, that would be a bad thing, right? Got to go out, dig in the wetland and do all these things. You're probably talking huge numbers to go fix 10 feet of pipe, right? So being proactive and fixing it before it fails, obviously is a good approach. I didn't see anything structurally that's like, would make me say to you like, oh, we got to do this like right now, or otherwise we're in trouble. I didn't see anything like that. So it's not like I'm trying to say doomsday. But it might be time to start thinking about this stuff.
Peter,
How long does it last? Infinite?
The cured in place pipe is, it's designed for 50 years. We're just sort of approaching 50 years though. So, from, the first installations, but, I've probably done, I don't know, 1 million feet of lining. And maybe we've had one liner fail, but that was due to installation, 1 or 2, but it's due to installation. It's not because of the material.
Peter, one more a question, I guess, is when you looked at the videos, any of the services, did you ID any services that were running clear? That were potentially leaky, or did you see any evidence of sump pumps kicking on?
I did not see any sump pumps. Obviously, you know, it's sort of a lucky thing if you see one. I would say some of the services ran clear. But it wasn't something that when I was looking at the inspection saying like, oh, this is a problem that needs to be fixed. If this project was to move forward, you know, we'd look at those detailed things during design.
There's a photograph that I had sent out that a customer, I think around 80 Summer Street there, right on their property behind the house. They have a photo of the toilet paper that came out of it and the flows that came out of it. And I was stunned that it would, you know, come up to the surface like that. So I don't know, you know, what happened either before or after that. And I think I distributed the photograph. So how is it going to actually come up to the surface and lift the cover enough that toilet paper comes out?
Yeah, it's a pretty significant event.
And it says like this: attempted to clean SS1 to east backed up homes, 53 Elm Street and others.
Yeah. So
And that's a totally different area than being over at Summer Street, but it is.
Well, it's the same system, right? So when we initially tried to clean this line. As we were cleaning it, we got calls from, I think it was 55 and 57 saying, hey, my toilet's bubbling, right? And so what happens is you get this high pressure jet that's scraping all the debris back and putting a bunch of water in the pipe. And that water can go up the lateral, right? And so that's what was happening there. So we just wanted to be cautious when we were cleaning. It's not necessarily a factor of normal conditions, but just a result of putting in high pressure water in the sewer. It was pretty surprising considering the length of this. You know, it's quite far away, but it did happen, right? So that's why we decided not to push this at that time.
Okay, but you did clean it from Summer Street on down, right?
Yep, we ended up cleaning and inspecting this whole line.
Okay.
Yep.
So 55 might have been, Elm Street might have been the one that the photo was from. I have to go to look that up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So yeah, just the other quick photos, right? Here's just a broken piece of pipe. Over on, I think this might be a paper street. So like you could line through this. You wouldn't need to dig this up.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Here's just another example of mineral deposits, right? So infiltration, you can see some active infiltration coming down here. Right. So, you know, depending on the tide and what's going on with the groundwater, this may be coming out more or coming out less.
Wonderful.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, clay pipe, you know, near the ocean, it's sort of typical. We inspected the pipes down here. They all look good. These are actually PVC. So that's great news, right? And then here's I think this should be highlighted. I think that we did inspect some of this. But here's probably like Dan, like this, you know, low hanging fruit. You know, this is I think the first joint right here. Yeah, it's at 2 feet. So this is the concrete pipe. And the joint has just failed, so you just have groundwater coming in. Right, so this is probably the most significant leak that we saw.
And did you fix it?
Oh, yeah, we just fixed it, yeah. No, we did not fix it, no.
No, it was just, if it's the most significant one, it would be one that I think would be getting up on the top of the list in terms of doing something.
Yeah, no, yeah, and I think that's something that we should discuss,
We shouldn't be saying, okay, it's going to be 900,000 to $1 million. This year, we, think this, and then maybe next year, the thing we can appropriate it when we absolutely have funds to do some of these important things today. So I think that's something that, we spent $45,000 or so to camera it and everything. We should start spending some money to do the most important areas.
I agree.
That's editorial.
Yeah.
No, it's a good point, because, we might as well start somewhere. We can get the big, it's like if we're on a boat and we're sinking, and you go after the biggest holes first.
Yep.
Yeah, and this is Rob. That was the importance of getting Peter to present this and, all the findings to you guys. Do
Mhm.
you go for an application, long-term, do it all? Do you have funds where you want to proceed? We can go any way you want to go with your direction.
We want to go to the best way.
Okay.
And we want to go sooner than later. And
So,
if it takes $200,000 to start, and we get some good value out of that in terms of lower flows and stuff, we will find the money for that. That's just me talking. I'm sure that
Yeah, and that
same way.
without talking about how should we prioritize these things, just from a funding perspective, the state revolving fund program, SRF. I don't know if we've done any SRF work in Cohasset, but basically it's a competitive loan program administered through Mass DEP, where you submitted a package in the middle of August, and all the municipalities in the state submit projects. They get ranked. In January 2024, the SRF program would come out with their list of approved projects, and then those would go into design and construction, right? So what we certainly could do is put in that application. It's not binding, right? So if we were to put the application in, and it doesn't get approved, not a big deal. If it does get approved, then you just get to make a decision on, how do you want to move forward? So that'd be one way to do it. If you wanted to do the whole project, if you wanted to phase it, we could do it like that as well. Something like this, if you wanted to, you could do this with a short liner, so you wouldn't need to just to fix this one joint. You could do this for probably 10 grand. And you'd go out and you wouldn't fix the whole pipe, but you just fix this joint. It's a good approach. The challenge that I've seen doing it in sort of band-aiding across the system is, if you just fix this joint, then sometimes the water just moves to the next joint, right? So you're just kind of chasing it. So in a situation like this, typically we recommend fixing the whole pipe at once. Otherwise you might be chasing it. But I think just this specific example, a short liner, might work, right?
I think that is something that is important, and that should be on the list of doing something like that. And keeping in mind, we have situations where we may be wanting to pave South Main Street, okay? And if we don't repair this manhole, that's under the street, let's say, and it sort of restricts how we're gonna go, how we're gonna do it if they just pave the road,
Yep.
wait 5 years, So part of your suggestions that you're going to do has to take the rest of the, through Brian and stuff like that, saying, yeah, we are planning to do something here that can make that more of a priority than something that is a little, that was already just paved.
Yeah, and I think that was actually the why we looked at Elm Street initially.
Right.
So paving is certainly in many places drives a lot of work. But yeah, that's why
So we are still doing something on Elm Street. Are we ready to do it sewer wise?
So let me just ask about margin, if you could go to that slide for a minute. We're planning on paving margin, and I'm
You have
getting
to,
a quote on the water type manholes similar to what we did on the Border Street before we paved a couple of years ago. But is there anything that you found that you would think you would need excavation for, or is it just could all those, anything you found there just be done from manholes to manhole?
so for margin, from what we saw in April, is basically just a bunch of infiltration and some cracks. So all of that could be lined. Assuming that you don't break the pipe when you pave, right? That sometimes happens, right? We inspect it, we say it's all good, they pave the street, we go back to fix it, and then the conditions have changed, right? That does happen.
Yeah.
But as of right now, I'd say that all of this work on Margin Street could be done trenchlessly.
Great.
Yep.
Because the water continues to flood over Howard Gleason Road and stuff to the matter of a foot or two. And that prevents, that provides more infiltration going into the lines. So
Mhm.
the watertight manhole, the covers, I think is an important thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to answer your question on the Elm Street portion, what happened a couple of years ago when the water department went through and did the water main, they also did a couple of sewer repairs based on the cammering that was done there. So
Yep.
so when the water main work was done, there was I think the joint at Elm Court right there, that was redone, and there may have been one other section, but everything else looked pretty decent.
Yeah. I remember this one actually being a good amount of infiltration, and it was a broken pipe. So, yep. So that's basically what I have for the findings. I guess the question is, would Cohasset want to put in this application to the SRF program to do a project of this size or of a different size?
How fast can you get us a summary and a recommendation with, the three options of, the full system or these partial systems? Is that something you can get us within the next 2 weeks if the deadline is August to file?
Yeah, I could pull something together.
For a full system replacement, right?
Yeah.
Is that application come with funding? If approved?
So for Cohasset, it's probably just a long-term, low-interest loan.
Okay.
For many other communities, you might get principal forgiveness, but I don't think Cohasset qualifies for that.
Okay. So low interest loan works. We can always try for, some sort of moratorium on principal or something. I don't know. Or forgiveness, whatever we can come up with.
One of
If-
the issues,
We haven't determined that if this rises to, level 1 for us to actually implement right away, because we've got this whole membrane issue we're dealing with, which is our top priority. So we just need to understand, where this would fall in line with some of the other things that we have going on.
One of the issues with the SRF funding, though, it does come with some other caveats, which basically add to cost. The state does have a lot of requirements that they impose with the SRF funding. MBE, WV requirements for participation. You also have bond counsel that would have to get involved, and they also have a series of policy statements that you have to incorporate into your contract. So it does tend to, at least in my opinion, increases the overall cost of the project about 15%. But you do have the low interest loans. And so generally, if you have a $1 million plus project, it makes sense to go SRF. If you have smaller projects, you may want to consider self-funding or, local borrowing.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement. Yeah, it depends what you can get for an interest rate, right? If you go by yourself. I think SRF is likely, it's probably less than 2% right now.
Yeah, that'd be the way to go.
And certainly the communities that get principal forgiveness, it's like a no-brainer, right? So, Lowell gets 20%.
Okay. Well, we can try it. I mean, we're in conversations about regional sewer. We've got this whole membrane issue we're dealing with. So maybe there's an opportunity for us to get some sort of forgiveness, but as far as, do we want to make that kind of decision hastily? Or is there enough information from you where we can make an informed decision to file an application? That's the question I have. So
yeah, let me,
how much time do we need to digest information to make a decision for an application versus,
It's not really an application either. It's just a project evaluation form, which is a pretty simple thing. The application comes later on, so
Yep.
I would think you'd be able to get the PEF in pretty fast. So you do have a little time, you can evaluate it. I just feel that maybe the flow data that we've been collecting with those flow meters, that might help to you guys to assess how much you want to do immediately, or what sections you want to do first.
listen, I have to apologize. I have to drop off.
Yeah, I'm actually going to be tight in about 10 minutes, but one of the things that Wayne surfaced that I would agree with is that, maybe we do this in like a two-step process and look at, 5 or 10, of the major bleeds in the system and go after them first, and then do a comprehensive plan for the rest of the piping.
So
Yeah.
on that note, Bill, I just want to mention, so there is a deadline today that just kind of I became aware of in the past couple of days that we're going to submit on, and we're including the lining of the section from Summer Street to the plant. That section right there. It's a CZM coastal vulnerability grant, part of kind of what the Woods Hole group was studying.
Yeah, I've got a new letter that was sent to me about 2 hours ago. I've signed it, and when we finish this, I'll scan it and send it off to I can't think of the lady who sent it to me, but I'll send it to her.
Montana.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, hopefully, if we got that, then that would be the first good section, test section. We do all the manholes through the marsh. We do that section with the lining, and we
Okay.
see how that works, and maybe move on to the next.
That'd be good.
yeah, and that's the next quick thing. Brian, the challenge with the CZM grant, obviously we talked about this yesterday, it's due today. The cost that I think Woods Hole was carrying for the electrical work is likely not even close.
Right, and just so that everyone else is aware, that was for raising the transformer at the it was like an electrical transformer and gear at the plant near the pump station.
Yeah, it's transformer, generator, and the ATS.
I would agree that the number was really light.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I hopped on some calls this morning and we haven't looked at this in detail, right? So it's just budgetary. But I think you're between design and construction and support during construction. We got to do electrical, we got to do structural, there's probably a civil component. You're probably more than $600,000.
So I'd prefer to be conservative than not. So, yeah, I think with the short amount of time, I think we just put the best estimate and submit and see if we get it.
All right.
Great.
All right, well, as always, Woodard and Curran has done an Excalibur job for us here, so we thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate the work. So, and Rob is our fearless leader. So
You do all the work, Peter. You're the brains.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Rob's not going
everyone.
anywhere until we get this membrane thing fixed. So we know where he lives.
yeah, there you go. Okay, so Brian, so we'll connect on the number for that grant, and we'll try to write something up. But it's certainly going to be much more than what was discussed. So
Okay.
I know everyone's got a lot of time constraints. One last thing very quickly. Did you guys put any discussion or thought into that asset management grant, Bill?
oh yeah, thanks, Rob.
Shared.
I've given that to Michelle and asked her to fill it out.
Okay,
I will check with her, see where that is.
okay.
And it sounded like the priority for that was to look at the facility, do an equipment inventory, condition assessment, and evaluate replacement costs and things like that.
Yeah, I'll get back to you and I'll let you know, Rob.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and that's due August, mid-August as well. So
Okay. So before we adjourn, we didn't set a date for our next meeting, which should be around the 25th of this month. Are you good, Wayne?
Yes, that's fine. If you wanted to do it sooner and get the involvement about the membranes and stuff like that we still have to discuss, I'm in favor of that too. So whatever you think's best.
Yeah. All right, well, I mean, we can always have a separate meeting on that if anything comes up. We can have a separate meeting on that.
Okay.
Oh,
So the date is going to be
the 25th, and then we can have another meeting on membranes should, once we get some definitive information on that.
okay. Very good.
All right, I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn.
Wayne, second.
Bill McGowan, aye.
Wayne Sawchuck, aye.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Right on.